Detective Miller tapped the rubber stamp against the ink pad. The hollow thud echoed in the small interview room at the Wilmington Police Precinct. He looked at me across the scuffed metal table. "Are you certain you want to proceed, Ms. Davis?" he asked. "Once I stamp this document, the state takes over. Your mother and your brother are looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal facility." I did not look at his eyes. I looked at the stack of papers sitting between us. On top of the pile was my denied mortgage application. Next to it was a forged contract for a luxury vehicle I had never driven. My hands rested flat on the table. My pulse was steady. Stamp it. Welcome back to Elena Vengeance. If you have ever been told you owe your family everything while they take everything you have, you will want to hear this story. Let me know your age in the comments, hit subscribe, and let us get into it. 4 weeks earlier, the air conditioning in my Honda Civic struggled against the humid Delaware afternoon. I was listening to local talk radio on my drive back from the office. The anchor ran a segment on the Port of Wilmington. Customs agents were cracking down on stolen luxury vehicles being loaded into shipping containers bound for overseas buyers. I turned the volume down as I pulled into my apartment complex. I was 29 years old. I evaluated risk for a living. I approved and denied mortgages based on debt-to-income ratios. My own ratio was pristine. I had an 800 credit score and $80,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account. I was 3 weeks away from closing on a duplex. The metal mailbox in the lobby squeaked when I turned my key. A single piece of mail sat inside. It was an oversized envelope made of heavy, textured red paper, the kind lenders use when they want to make sure you open it before you throw it away. The front read, "Final Notice." I ran my thumb over the plastic window. My name, Mia Davis. Underneath my name, an account number for a premium auto financing company. I unlocked my apartment door and dropped my keys on the counter. I tore the envelope open. It was a default notice for a $72,000 loan on a 2026 Audi Q7. 2 missed payments, interest accruing daily, late fees stacked at the bottom of the page. Most people would panic. I opened my laptop. I logged into my credit portal. The loading circle spun for 3 seconds. When the dashboard appeared, the green numbers I was used to seeing were gone. A red dial sat in the center of the screen. 590. My credit score had dropped 210 points. The duplex, the closing, gone. I dialed the toll-free number on the letterhead. The customer service representative answered after 4 rings. I gave him my Social Security number. I told him there was a mistake. I explained that I drive a 2018 Honda and do not own an Audi. The keyboard clicked on his end. "The loan was signed in person at a dealership in Newark, Delaware," he said. "You presented a physical driver license." I stopped pacing my kitchen. I asked him to read me the contact information on the file. He listed my old college email address. Then he read the secondary phone number for emergency contact. I recognized the area code. I recognized the prefix. I recognized all 10 digits. It was my mother's cell phone. The drive from Wilmington to Newark took 25 minutes on the interstate. The asphalt blurred beneath my tires as the midday sun beat down on my windshield. As a mortgage underwriter, my brain defaults to risk assessment. I calculate liabilities, verify income streams, and search for red flags for 8 hours a day. My mind immediately processed the sheer financial damage of a $72,000 auto loan. Vehicles lose a significant portion of their retail value the second the rubber touches public pavement. A luxury car is never an asset. It is a depreciating anchor. I had spent 2 long years clipping coupons, skipping vacations, and funneling every spare paycheck into a dedicated account for a multifamily duplex. A duplex generates equity. A duplex provides shelter and passive income. An Audi Q7 just looks expensive in a grocery store parking lot. My family never understood the difference between building wealth and projecting wealth. I turned onto my parents' street. The neighborhood consisted of manicured lawns, mature oak trees, and aging colonial homes with freshly painted shutters. I pulled my Honda to the curb. I did not need to wait for business hours to verify what the customer service representative told me on the phone. The proof was parked right on the aggregate concrete driveway. The 2026 Audi Q7 sat there reflecting the bright afternoon sun. Deep metallic gray paint, dark tinted windows, 22-inch alloy wheels. It possessed a custom dealer plate frame that my brother Ryan had talked about wanting since last Thanksgiving. The vehicle looked like a sleek metal predator resting on the pavement. My legal identity was tethered to that machine. I walked up the brick pathway. I did not bother knocking. The front door was unlocked, the way it always was in this quiet suburb. I pushed the heavy wood open. The smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the foyer. The house felt peaceful. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. The domestic tranquility felt like an insult compared to the panic vibrating in my chest. I walked into the kitchen. My mother and father sat at the center island. Susan was slicing a cherry tomato on a wooden board. David was scrolling through an article on his tablet. They looked serene. I walked forward and placed the heavy red final notice envelope directly over my mother's lunch plate. Susan looked down at the paper. She did not flinch. Her shoulders did not tense. She picked up her cloth napkin, dabbed the corner of her mouth, and let out a soft sigh of irritation. I waited for the lie. I expected her to claim ignorance, to suggest a stranger stole my information, or to act shocked. Instead, she offered pure annoyance. "Mia, do not burst into this house trying to cause a scene," Susan said. She pushed the envelope back across the granite counter. Ryan needed a reliable car for his new sales position. His credit took a minor hit last year after he lost his apartment. We knew you had plenty of runway. I stared at her. The casual tone of her voice made the room spin. "You forged my signature," I said. I kept my voice low in my chest. "You went to a dealership and signed a legally binding financial contract using my social security number." David set his tablet face down. He took his reading glasses off and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We did not forge anything," he said. "We just co-signed as you. It is a temporary family favor. We are going to make the payments until Ryan gets his commission checks." I stared at the man who taught me how to read. Co-signed as me. That is not a financial term. That is felony fraud. My eyes drifted past my father to the far end of the island. Next to the ceramic fruit bowl sat a tall stack of thick, cream-colored envelopes. Gold foil stamped the edges, catching the overhead lights. They were invitations for their upcoming 35th anniversary gala. An expensive, catered event scheduled at the local country club. My mother had spent weeks agonizing over the font choices and the floral arrangements. The contrast made my stomach turn. They were planning a lavish, high society party while detonating my financial future to buy my brother a toy. The heavy mahogany front door clicked open. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ryan walked into the kitchen. He wore a crisp tailored suit and expensive leather loafers. The scent of designer cologne trailed behind him. He tossed a heavy key fob onto the marble counter. The metal rings clattered against the stone. He grabbed a green grape from the bowl and popped it into his mouth. He did not look like a man drowning in late notices. He looked like a man who had figured out how to make someone else pay his tab. "Hey, Mia," he mumbled, chewing the fruit. "What brings you out to the suburbs on a Tuesday?" I pointed to the red envelope near his elbow. "You missed 2 payments," I said. "You tanked my credit score 210 points. Ryan rolled his eyes. He leaned against the counter and crossed his ankles. "Relax," he said. "The new job pays on a weird commission schedule. I will catch up next week. It is just a car. Stop acting like the sky is falling." "It is just a car that legally belongs to me," I replied. I looked at the 3 of them. They formed a united front of financial delusion. They shared a silent agreement that my resources belonged to the collective. I tightened my grip on my purse. "You have 48 hours to refinance that vehicle out of my name," I said. "If my name is not off that loan by Friday morning, I am reporting the vehicle stolen." Susan let out a sharp laugh. She stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You will do no such thing. You are his sister. Family helps family when times get tough. Family does not commit identity theft, Mom." David stood up to join her. "You have always been exactly like this," he said. "A spreadsheet robot. You sit in your cubicle counting pennies and forget where you came from. We paid your college tuition. You owe this family. You can handle a temporary dip in your precious credit score to help your own brother succeed." They did not pay my college tuition. I earned a full academic scholarship through late nights of studying. I worked closing shifts at a diner to pay for my textbooks and rent. They routinely claimed credit for my sweat whenever it suited their narrative. I did not raise my voice to argue the past. Arguing with people who rewrite history is a waste of oxygen. I turned my back to them. I walked down the hallway and out the front door. The afternoon heat hit my face. I stood on the aggregate concrete and looked at the Audi one last time. I thought about the duplex. I thought about the phone call I had to make to my loan officer tomorrow morning. My parents truly believed my success existed solely to fund their comfort. They were about to find out how a spreadsheet robot actually operates. The fluorescent lights on the 9th floor buzzed a low, steady hum above my cubicle. My dual monitors displayed rows of financial data, including bank statements, tax returns, and payroll forms. My profession requires finding the hidden truth inside complex numbers. People lie on loan applications every single day. They hide outstanding debts, they inflate their annual incomes, they forge signatures on legal documents. I spend 40 hours a week hunting down those lies and protecting the bank from bad investments. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. I sat in my ergonomic chair protecting a multi-billion-dollar corporation while my own flesh and blood robbed me blind in the suburbs. I looked at the printed photograph taped to the corner of my right monitor. It showed a brick duplex in a historic neighborhood just south of the city center. It featured wrought iron railings and original hardwood floors. I had run the amortization schedules a dozen times. The rental income from the lower unit would cover 80% of the monthly mortgage obligation. It was my exit strategy from the corporate grind. The building represented the physical manifestation of every skipped dinner, every canceled vacation, and every budget spreadsheet I had meticulously tracked since college graduation. I had the structural inspection scheduled for next Tuesday. The black desk phone shattered the quiet of my workspace. The internal caller identification screen flashed the name Marcus. He worked 2 floors down in the origination department. Marcus was the senior loan officer handling my duplex purchase. We often traded coffee recommendations in the break room. He possessed a naturally booming, cheerful voice. When I picked up the receiver and pressed it to my ear, that cheerfulness was gone. "Mia, do you have a minute?" Marcus asked. His tone sounded tight and carefully measured. It was the kind of voice medical professionals use when walking into a waiting room to deliver bad news. I told him I was available. He cleared his throat. "The automated underwriting software ran a final soft pull on your credit profile this morning ahead of the formal closing," he said. A new trade line appeared. I closed my eyes. The leather of my chair squeaked as I leaned back. Marcus continued talking. "The system flagged a premium auto financing account opened less than 30 days ago. The principal balance is $72,000. The monthly payment obligation is $1,200. Furthermore, the account is reporting a delinquent status. You are 60 days past due." As an underwriter, I knew exactly what those numbers meant. Federal guidelines dictate strict limits on how much monthly debt a borrower can carry relative to their gross income. Adding a $1,200 monthly liability destroyed my ratio. The delinquent status acted as a fatal poison pill for any conventional mortgage product. The math was objective, and unforgiving. Marcus paused. I could hear him shifting paperwork on his desk. "Mia," he said softly, "I know how careful you are with your finances. I know you have been saving for this property for a long time. Is this a clerical error? Did someone steal your identity?" The pity in his voice burned. The humiliation of being a financial professional with a ruined credit profile felt like a physical weight pressing against my chest. Having a colleague witness this destruction amplified the shame. I could not bring myself to tell him my own parents orchestrated the theft. I told him I was handling a complex identity issue and thanked him for his time. I placed the receiver gently back onto its cradle. I reached out and peeled the photograph of the brick duplex off my monitor. I folded the paper in half. I dropped it into the small metal trash can under my desk. 2 years of intense financial discipline vanished into the garbage. The dream was officially dead. The house would go back on the open market. Someone else would collect the rental income. Someone else would build equity. I picked up my cell phone. I opened the message thread with my mother. I needed her to understand the tangible cost of her actions. I did not type a long, emotional paragraph. I kept the language clinical. "The car loan ruined my debt-to-income ratio," I typed. "My mortgage pre-approval was just revoked by the underwriting department. I lost the house because you needed to buy Ryan a luxury vehicle." I pressed send. I watched the screen. The small gray bubbles appeared, indicating she was typing. They vanished. They appeared again. She was carefully crafting her response. I waited for an apology. I waited for a sliver of maternal guilt. I waited for her to realize she had sacrificed her daughter's future for her son's vanity. The phone vibrated in my palm. The message illuminated the glass screen. "Everything happens for a reason, sweetie. Ryan just made Employee of the Month at the dealership. He is doing so well." I read the text 3 times. I searched the pixels for any trace of sarcasm or remorse. There was none. She offered toxic positivity wrapped in profound indifference. She genuinely believed that my lost home was simply an unfortunate but acceptable casualty on the path to my brother's success. The sheer lack of empathy acted as a catalyst. A heavy steel door closed inside my mind. The daughter who sought validation from her parents ceased to exist. I looked at the bright screen of my phone and finally understood my role in their narrative. I was not a person to them. I was a utility. I was a reliable asset to be mined whenever Ryan required additional resources. They viewed my excellent credit score the same way a mining company views a rich vein of coal. It was something meant to be extracted, consumed, and discarded. They expected me to absorb the financial blow quietly because I was the strong one, the responsible one, the spreadsheet robot. If they wanted a spreadsheet robot, I would give them one. A robot does not negotiate with emotional manipulators. A robot follows the data. The customer service representative on the phone had mentioned the loan was signed in person at a local dealership. That meant physical documents existed. Real paper forms with wet ink signatures and copies of identification cards were sitting in a file cabinet somewhere. I locked my computer terminal. I grabbed my blazer from the back of my chair. I slung my leather purse over my shoulder. I did not tell my supervisor I was leaving for the afternoon. I bypassed the elevators and took the concrete stairwell down to the parking garage. The time for text messages and 48-hour ultimatums had expired. I needed to see the physical evidence. I needed to know exactly how they managed to bypass the stringent security protocols of a major financial institution. I got into my Honda and merged onto the highway. I was driving directly to the local branch of the lending bank to pull the original origination file. The family drama was over. The forensic investigation had begun. The glass doors of the local banking branch slid open. Cold air rushed over my skin. The lobby smelled like lemon floor polish and freshly printed currency. I walked straight past the teller line and approached the reception desk. I asked to speak with the branch manager regarding a fraudulent commercial liability. My tone left no room for negotiation. A man in his late 50s wearing a charcoal blazer stepped out of a glass office. He introduced himself as Thomas Harrison. We walked into his workspace. He closed the door. The ambient noise of the lobby vanished. I sat in a leather guest chair and placed a manila folder on his mahogany desk. I did not raise my voice or shed a single tear. I laid out my evidence like a prosecuting attorney building a timeline. I handed him a printed timesheet from my employer. I provided the digital swipe card logs from the security turnstiles at my office building. The timestamps proved I was physically inside a high-security corporate facility in downtown Wilmington at the exact hour the auto financing contract was executed at a dealership in Newark. I gave him a copy of my passport and my driver license. Harrison adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He scrutinized the documents. The polite customer service smile faded from his lips. He typed my social security number into his terminal. The keyboard clattered in the quiet room. He hit a final key and turned the monitor slightly toward me. He printed the origination packet. The laser printer in the corner hummed and spit out 20 pages of dense legal text. He slid the stack across the desk. I looked at the wet ink on the signature line. It was a clumsy imitation of my cursive. The loops were wrong. The pressure was uneven. I scanned the bottom of the page to find the dealership authorization stamp. The signature belonging to the finance manager caught my attention. Vincent Caldwell. I knew that name. Vince was my brother Ryan's former college roommate, a guy who always wore too much cologne and bragged about finding loopholes in the system. Vince worked at the Newark auto lot. He acted as the inside man. He deliberately bypassed the required physical identity verification protocols because he wanted the commission, and he wanted to help his friend. He looked the other way while my parents signed my name on the dotted line. But an inside man at a dealership cannot bypass the lending institution's internal digital security checks. Lenders utilize secondary verification algorithms. They require linked account authentication to disperse funds. I pointed to a specific sequence of numbers on the third page of the packet. "How did this pass your internal security sweep?" I asked Harrison. Harrison tapped a line on the paper. "The down payment verification was routed through a joint checking account you hold with Susan Davis," he said. The words triggered an immediate memory. 11 years ago, the week before I left for my university dorm, my mother drove me to a local credit union. She guided me to a teller window and instructed me to sign a new account form. She claimed we needed a shared account for college emergencies. She promised it would allow her to transfer money for textbooks or medical bills if I ever needed help. I was 18 years old. I trusted my mother. I never used the account. I never checked the balance. I forgot it existed. Susan never forgot. She kept that account active for a decade. She maintained a backdoor into my financial identity. She weaponized an 18-year-old's trust to authenticate a fraudulent loan 11 years later. The system viewed the transaction as legitimate because the verification pinged an account bearing my name. Harrison pulled a second folder from his drawer. His expression turned grim. "Ms. Davis," he said quietly, "are you aware of the revolving credit limit attached to this profile?" I frowned. I told him I was only aware of the auto financing liability. He shook his head. He placed a new ledger sheet on top of the car contract. When the dealership ran your credit profile, the application included a request for a personal line of credit. The approval granted a $15,000 limit. My lungs forgot how to process oxygen. They did not just saddle me with a luxury vehicle. They opened a secondary credit line to fund the transaction. The depth of the theft expanded right before my eyes. "Let me see the disbursement ledger," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to a stranger. Harrison slid the paper closer to me. The document tracked exactly where the $15,000 went. The math painted a grotesque picture. $7,000 was wired to the auto dealership to cover the required down payment for the Audi. That left an $8,000 balance. I traced my finger down the column to the second transaction. The remaining $8,000 was not sent to a dealership. It was not sent to an auto insurance broker. It was wired directly to the billing department of the Oak Creek Country Club. The gold-foiled invitations sitting on my parents' kitchen island flashed in my mind. The heavy cream-colored paper, the elegant calligraphy. Susan had spent weeks bragging about securing the grand ballroom for her upcoming anniversary gala. She complained about the strict deposit requirements of the venue. Now I knew how she afforded it. My parents did not commit identity theft just to help Ryan secure a reliable mode of transportation. They used his terrible credit as a convenient smokescreen. Susan leveraged the scheme to extract cash for her own vanity. She stole $8,000 of my future to buy herself an expensive party. She financed her high society illusion using my stolen signature. The betrayal evolved from a misguided family favor into a calculated parasitic extraction. I thanked Mr. Harrison for his time. I requested physical copies of every single page. I gathered the fraudulent contracts, the ledger sheets, and the verification forms. I placed them into my manila folder and walked out of the office. The bright sunlight outside the bank felt blinding. The spreadsheet robot had all the data she needed. I pulled my phone from my purse and searched for Ryan's address. It was time to pay my brother a visit. Ryan lived in a mid-rise apartment complex on the industrial side of the city. The building featured exposed brick and polished concrete floors. It projected an image of urban success. The reality of the complex was far less glamorous. The management company offered aggressive move-in specials to obscure the thin walls and lack of dedicated parking. I parked my Honda on the street and walked past the rusted security gate. I held the heavy manila folder tightly against my side. I knocked on his door. The peephole darkened for a fraction of a second before the deadbolt clicked. Ryan opened the door. He was no longer wearing the tailored suit from yesterday. He wore a rumpled gray sweatsuit, and his hair looked unwashed. The confidence he displayed in our parents' kitchen had completely evaporated. The dark circles under his eyes suggested he had not slept. He did not invite me inside. He stood in the doorway, blocking the view of his living room. The smell of stale coffee and stale beer drifted into the hallway. "What do you want, Mia?" he asked. His voice sounded thin and strained. I did not offer small talk. I pulled the bank ledger from my folder and pressed it against his chest. "I visited the branch manager this morning," I said. "I know about Vince. I know about the joint checking account. And I know about the $15,000 personal line of credit." Ryan looked at the paper. His shoulders slumped. The arrogant facade collapsed instantly. He stepped back and let the door swing open. I walked into the apartment. The space was a disaster. Empty takeout containers cluttered the coffee table. A stack of unopened mail sat next to the television. This was the reality behind the expensive colognes and the luxury vehicle. This was the life my parents were desperately trying to subsidize. "Mia, please," he whispered. He ran both hands through his messy hair. He dropped onto the edge of his sofa. "You do not understand the pressure I am under. The sales job is entirely commission-based. The market is terrible right now." Mom and Dad insisted this was the only way to help me get back on my feet. "They did not just help you get back on your feet," I countered. "They bought you an $80,000 anchor." Then Mom skimmed $8,000 off the top to pay for her anniversary gala. Ryan buried his face in his hands. His shoulders began to shake. A jagged sob escaped his throat. I have never seen my brother cry. He was always the golden child, the charismatic athlete who coasted through high school and college on charm alone. Seeing him break down triggered a deeply ingrained instinct to comfort him. The older sister conditioning flared up in my chest. "I am drowning," he sobbed. "I owe money to people who do not send polite letters in the mail. I thought the new job would fix everything. I thought I could make the payments before you ever noticed the credit pull. I am so sorry, Mia. I swear I will fix this. I will enter financial counseling. I will sell my watch collection. I will do whatever it takes. He reached under the coffee table and pulled a small white envelope from his duffel bag. He stood up and handed it to me. His hands were trembling. His eyes were bloodshot and wet with real tears. "Take this," he pleaded. "I scrounged this together this morning. It is a good faith payment. I will give you the rest as soon as my next commission check clears. Just please do not go to the authorities. Please do not ruin Mom's life over my stupid mistakes." I opened the envelope. A certified cashier's check sat inside. The amount printed on the baseline read $5,000. The payee line bore my name. For a very brief moment, the heavy tension in my chest eased. A sliver of hope cut through the anger. $5,000 represented a substantial sum. It proved he was taking the situation seriously. It showed initiative. It suggested that maybe the family system was not entirely corrupted. Perhaps this was the painful wake-up call he needed to finally mature. Maybe we could restructure the debt, refinance the vehicle, and handle the mess privately without involving the state fraud division. I looked at his tear-streaked face and almost believed the redemption narrative. Then my professional training overrode my sibling empathy. I am a mortgage underwriter. I look at financial instruments all day long. My eyes automatically drifted to the bottom left corner of the cashier's check. I scanned the 9-digit routing number printed in magnetic ink. A traditional bank check utilizes a routing sequence linked to a Federal Reserve branch. The number printed on Ryan's check did not belong to Chase, Bank of America, or any recognized credit union. I recognized the specific numerical sequence. It belonged to a notoriously predatory title loan corporation that operated out of strip malls along the state border. I turned the check over. I looked at the issuing watermark. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. Ryan did not empty a secret savings account to make amends. He did not sell his assets to right his wrongs. He drove the 2026 Audi Q7 down to a strip mall lender. He presented the fraudulent paperwork proving he possessed possession of the vehicle. He used the car as collateral to secure a high-interest payday title loan. He borrowed $5,000 against a vehicle that was already fully financed under my Social Security number. The tears were real. The panic was real. But the apology was a calculated manipulation. He dug the financial hole exponentially deeper just to buy my silence for another week. If he defaulted on the payday loan, the predatory lender would attempt to seize the vehicle. Since my name was on the primary note, I would be legally responsible for the deficiency balance of 2 separate overlapping loans. He was perfectly willing to trigger a catastrophic financial avalanche that would bury me permanently, as long as it kept the police away from his door today. The sliver of hope shattered. The rot inside my family was not a temporary lapse in judgment. It was terminal. I placed the cashier's check on the coffee table next to a half-empty beer bottle. I did not yell. I did not offer a dramatic speech about betrayal. I looked at the man who shared my DNA and felt absolutely nothing. "You cannot borrow your way out of a stolen identity, Ryan," I said. I turned and walked out of the apartment. I did not look back when he called my name. I walked down the concrete hallway and exited the building. I got into my car and locked the doors. The air inside the cabin felt suffocating. I pulled my cell phone from my purse. I opened the message thread with my mother. I typed a single sentence: "Refinance the vehicle by Friday morning, or I am filing a felony police report." I hit send. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. The trap was set. The ultimatum was delivered. I expected them to panic. I expected them to finally realize the severity of their crimes. I underestimated my mother's capacity for warfare. Susan was not going to surrender. She was going to burn the entire family to the ground just to protect her illusion. The drive back to my apartment felt remarkably hollow. I had dropped the ultimatum. I expected a frantic phone call from my father or a panicked text from my brother. I assumed the threat of felony charges would force them into a desperate scramble to secure a legitimate auto refinance. I parked my Honda in my designated spot and walked up the 3 flights of concrete stairs to my floor. I unlocked my door and tossed my keys onto the entryway table. The silence of my living room usually offered a sanctuary from the high-stress environment of my corporate job. Tonight, the silence felt like a holding cell. I walked into the kitchen and opened the freezer. I pulled out a plastic tray of frozen lasagna and peeled back the clear film. I placed it into the microwave and punched the keypad for 4 minutes. The appliance began to hum. I leaned against the counter and watched the yellow numbers count down. My cell phone vibrated against the granite countertop. The sudden mechanical buzz startled me. I looked at the illuminated screen. A text message from my cousin David appeared. David lived in New Jersey and rarely spoke to me outside of major holidays. I unlocked the screen. The message contained 0 pleasantries. "I cannot believe you are doing this to your own mother," David wrote, "after everything they sacrificed to give you a head start in life. Suing elderly people to steal a car is a new low, even for you." I stared at the words. Elderly people. My parents were 59 years old. They played mixed doubles tennis on weekends and drank expensive wine. They were not fragile retirees. And suing to steal a car. The phrasing made no sense. Before I could process the message from David, my phone vibrated a second time. A notification popped up from my cousin Sarah, then another from my Uncle Robert. Within 60 seconds, my notification center was flooded. Green and blue bubbles stacked on top of each other in a relentless digital assault. I opened the family group chat that I had muted months ago. Susan had not spent the afternoon scrambling to secure a loan. She spent the afternoon drafting a fictional narrative and broadcasting it to every blood relative in our contacts list. She went to war. I read the paragraphs my mother had seeded into the family network. Her lie was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She claimed that Ryan was finally finding incredible success at his new sales position. She stated that I had willingly co-signed for his new vehicle as a gesture of sibling support. According to Susan, I had suddenly grown intensely jealous of my brother's newfound wealth and flashy lifestyle. Her narrative concluded with a fabricated threat. She told the entire extended family that I was threatening to file a frivolous lawsuit against her and my father to forcibly repossess the Audi because I wanted to keep the luxury vehicle for myself. She inverted the victim and aggressor dynamic with terrifying precision. She provided a logical explanation for why my name appeared on the paperwork. She painted Ryan as a hardworking underdog. She framed herself as a heartbroken matriarch, trying to protect her son from a greedy corporate daughter. The microwave beeped 3 times. I ignored the notifications and opened the appliance door. I pulled the plastic tray out by the edges. I grabbed a metal fork from the drawer and walked over to my small dining table. I sat down in the dark apartment. The only light emanated from the street lamps outside my window and the glowing rectangle of my phone. I took a bite of the lasagna. The edges were boiling hot, but the center remained frozen solid. The cold cheese and icy pasta tasted like cardboard. I swallowed it anyway. I needed the calories. My body was operating on adrenaline. The screen lit up with one final message. The sender name read, Aunt Barbara. Barbara was my mother's older sister. She hosted Thanksgiving dinner every year. She mailed handwritten cards for every birthday. She was the one relative who always asked about my career and seemed genuinely proud of my promotions. When I lost my first high school tennis match, Barbara took me out for ice cream and told me that resilience was a muscle you had to build. I opened her message. The text was short. Your mother has been crying for 3 hours, Barbara wrote. We all know you make a high salary at the bank. Trying to bankrupt your parents out of pure jealousy is disgusting. Do not come to Thanksgiving this year. You are dead to this family." The words hit my chest like a physical weight. Dead to this family. The psychological isolation descended upon me in an instant. This is the reality of exposing a toxic family system in American society. The truth does not immediately set you free. The truth isolates you. The system protects the lie because the lie maintains the comfortable status quo. The family network would rather excommunicate the truth teller than admit the matriarch is a thief. I sat alone in the dark eating a frozen dinner while my mother received sympathy casseroles in her 4-bedroom house. I felt the familiar sting of rejection burning behind my eyes. Most people would break down. Most people would draft long, emotional paragraphs defending their character. They would beg Aunt Barbara to listen to reason. They would call their cousins, crying. I did not cry. Crying is a biological response to pain. I was no longer in pain. I was in the middle of a tactical legal dispute. Tears provide zero return on investment. I set my fork down on the table. I walked over to my work bag and pulled out my personal laptop. I carried it to the dining table and flipped the screen open. The white light illuminated the dark room. I connected my cell phone to the computer using a white charging cable. I opened a fresh digital directory on my desktop. I named the master folder State Evidence. I opened the family group chat on my phone screen. I pressed the dual buttons to capture a screenshot. The digital shutter clicked. I captured Cousin David's message. Click. I captured Sarah's message. Click. I captured Uncle Robert's message. Click. I captured the long fictional paragraph written by my mother. Click. Finally, I captured the message from Aunt Barbara declaring me dead to the family. I dragged the high-resolution image files from my phone directly into the desktop folder. I renamed each file with the corresponding date, timestamp, and sender name. I did not view these messages as emotional daggers anymore. I viewed them as documentary evidence of witness intimidation and organized defamation. My mother thought she was launching a successful public relations campaign to destroy my reputation. She did not realize she was creating a permanent digital trail of her own malice. She was providing the fraud investigators with documented proof of a coordinated smear campaign designed to intimidate a victim of financial crime. I opened my email client. I attached the folder of screenshots to a draft. I addressed the email to the local police precinct fraud division. I did not hit send yet. I was giving them until Friday morning to refinance the vehicle. I honor my deadlines. I closed the laptop screen. The apartment plunged back into darkness. My heart rate was slow and steady. I had mapped their entire network of lies. I had built an impenetrable binder of forensic evidence. The spreadsheet robot was fully operational and ready for the deadline. I walked to the kitchen sink to wash my fork. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The board was set. I just had to wait for the clock to run out. But as I turned the faucet off, a sharp knock echoed from my front door. It was Thursday night. The deadline was tomorrow. I looked through the peephole and realized Susan was not waiting for the clock to run out. She was changing the rules of the game. The sharp knock against my apartment door startled me. The digital clock on my microwave glowed 9:14. Visitors did not arrive unannounced in my building. The security gate at the front of the complex required a dial-in code. I walked quietly to the entryway and pressed my eye against the brass peephole. My mother stood in the hallway. The arrogant matriarch who spun a fictional web of lies to the extended family hours earlier had vanished. The woman standing on my welcome mat looked completely shattered. Her shoulders sagged under her expensive cashmere cardigan. Her mascara was smeared beneath her eyes. She clutched a leather handbag tightly against her chest. She looked like a woman who finally understood the gravity of federal prison. I unbolted the door and pulled it open just enough to block the threshold. I did not invite her inside. "Mia, please," she said. Her voice trembled. She did not sound angry or defensive. She sounded terrified. "I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry." I kept my hand on the doorknob. The hallway smelled of her signature floral perfume mixed with the faint scent of rain. "Why are you here, Mom?" I asked. "The deadline is tomorrow morning." She reached into her handbag. Her hands were shaking violently. She pulled out a folded piece of white paper. She did not hand it to me immediately. She held it against her chest like a shield. "I panicked," she whispered. "When you threatened the police, I just panicked. I thought if I got the family on my side, you would back down. I know it was wrong. I know what I did was unforgiven. I was just so scared of losing everything. We got in too deep with Ryan. We could not tell your father about the country club deposit." The lies just kept compounding. She took a deep breath. A single tear tracked down her cheek. She unfolded the paper and held it out to me. "I fixed it, Mia," she said. "I swear to you, I fixed it. Please, look at this." I took the paper. It was a printed confirmation page from the auto lending portal. The document displayed the account number, matching the red envelope sitting on my counter. Below the account details, a bold green banner announced a successful transaction. A payment of $2,000 was processed at 8:45 tonight. The confirmation number was 22 digits long. The payment cleared the 60 days of arrears and covered the late fees. The account status listed on the page read current. I read the confirmation page twice. The math was accurate. The payment was substantial. "We are going to the credit union on Monday morning," Susan said. Her voice gained a fraction of stability. "Your father is liquidating his secondary retirement account. We are paying off the Audi entirely and transferring the title to Ryan. We are closing the personal line of credit. I promise you, Mia, by Monday afternoon, your name will be completely removed from all of it. Your credit will bounce back. You can still get your duplex." I looked at the woman who raised me. The exhaustion in her face was undeniable. The fear in her eyes felt genuine. The receipt in my hand represented concrete financial action. For the first time since opening that final notice, I felt the tight coil of anxiety in my chest begin to loosen. A wave of profound relief washed over me. I'm a pragmatic person. I deal in risk and liability. Filing a felony police report against my own parents was the nuclear option. It meant trials, lawyers, and permanent destruction of the family unit. If they were actually willing to liquidate assets to cure the debt, the primary objective was achieved. My credit profile would heal. I could revive the mortgage application. The duplex was salvageable. I handed the receipt back to her. "Monday afternoon," I said, "if my name is not off that liability by the end of business hours on Monday, I am walking into the precinct." Susan nodded frantically. "Monday," she promised. She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Thank you, Mia. I do not deserve your mercy. I swear I will make this right." She turned and walked down the hallway. I watched her push the heavy fire door open and disappear into the stairwell. I closed my apartment door and locked the deadbolt. I leaned back against the wood and exhaled a long, shaky breath. The crisis was averted. The spreadsheet robot could finally power down. I walked to my bedroom, stripped off my work clothes, and slept for 9 straight hours. The nightmare was over. The alarm on my cell phone woke me at 6:30 on Friday morning. Sunlight streamed through the blinds. I felt rested. The crushing weight of the fraudulent debt no longer compressed my lungs. I walked into the kitchen and started the coffee maker. I planned to call Marcus at the origination department at 9 to explain the situation was resolved and ask him to hold the duplex file for 1 more week. I poured black coffee into a ceramic mug. I picked up my phone to check the morning news. A red notification badge glowed on my email icon. I tapped the screen. The message originated from the automated alert system of the premium auto financier. I had set up tracking alerts on the account portal 2 days ago to monitor the balance. I opened the email. The bold text at the top of the message did not read current. The text read, "Payment reversed." I set my coffee mug down on the granite counter. A drop of hot liquid spilled over the rim. I tapped the secure link and logged into the portal using my stolen credentials. The dashboard loaded. The red dial was back. The account status displayed 60 days delinquent. I opened the transaction history tab. The line item from Thursday night was visible, $2,000 processed. Directly below that entry sat a new line item, generated at 4:15 this morning. Payment rejected. Reason code, non-sufficient funds. My vision tunneled. The numbers on the screen blurred. Susan did not liquidate an asset. She did not gather $2,000 to cure the arrears. She logged into the payment portal and initiated an electronic transfer using a checking account that she knew possessed a zero balance. She deliberately wrote a bad digital check. She understood the automated clearinghouse system takes 24 to 48 hours to verify funds between institutions. She knew the portal would instantly generate a receipt of payment before the verification process failed. She drove to my apartment, performed an Oscar-worthy emotional breakdown, shed real tears, and handed me a worthless piece of paper. She did it to stall. She knew my deadline was Friday morning. She needed me to stand down through the weekend. She manufactured a fake victory to lower my defenses because she needed more time to execute whatever real plan she was actually building in the shadows. The betrayal stung twice as hard because I let my guard down. I allowed biology to override logic. I looked at the tears on her face and chose to believe the mother instead of the underwriter. I ignored the data and trusted the emotion. The emotional cord connecting me to Susan Davis snapped. The sound echoed in the silent kitchen. The final tether of daughterly affection dissolved into absolute clinical detachment. There would be no more ultimatums. There would be no more 48-hour windows for redemption. The time for private family resolution evaporated the second that electronic check bounced. The system was not flawed. The system was working exactly as designed by a predator. I closed the browser tab. I opened the digital folder labeled State Evidence. I dragged the new bounced payment notification into the directory. I unplugged my laptop and shoved it into my leather work bag. I grabbed my car keys. I did not bother drinking my coffee. I walked out of the apartment and locked the door. The destination was no longer the bank or the dealership. The destination was the Wilmington Police Department. The exterior of the Wilmington Police Precinct consisted of brutalist concrete and shatterproof glass. The structure projected an imposing aesthetic of absolute authority. I pulled my Honda into the visitor parking lot and turned off the ignition. I did not immediately exit the vehicle. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the heavy double doors of the precinct. My fingers traced the texture of the steering wheel. The dark leather felt icy against my skin. The morning air carried a sharp chill despite the rising sun. I watched a man and a woman walk toward the entrance. They flanked a teenage boy holding a stack of paperwork. The father rested his hand securely on his son's shoulder. They were likely filing a report for a minor fender bender or a stolen bicycle. They moved as a unit. They presented a cohesive front against an external problem. I sat alone in my car, grieving the family dynamic I witnessed on the sidewalk. I never possessed that level of security. My family did not form a phalanx to protect me from the world. They actively invited the danger into my home and expected me to finance the damages. The realization carried a profound weight. I was about to walk into a government building and intentionally destroy my own bloodline. The cultural programming of American society dictates unwavering loyalty to your parents. The narrative insists you absorb their flaws because they gave you life. The mythology of the unbroken family unit is a powerful psychological deterrent against self-preservation. I looked at the thick black binder sitting on the passenger seat. The leather cover concealed $87,000 of fraudulent debt, a bounced electronic check, and a meticulously documented smear campaign. The mythology was a lie. The spreadsheet robot understood that data does not respect mythology. Data only respects facts. I grabbed the binder. I opened the car door and stepped onto the pavement. The cold air hit my lungs. I walked across the lot and pushed through the heavy glass doors of the precinct. The lobby smelled of institutional cleaning supplies and stale coffee. A uniformed officer sat behind bulletproof glass at the reception desk. I approached the partition. "I need to file a complex report for felony identity theft and interstate wire fraud," I said. My voice did not shake. The officer typed briefly on his keyboard. He printed a visitor badge and directed me down a long linoleum hallway to the Financial Crimes Division. I walked into a small open office area. A detective in a wrinkled gray suit stood near a water cooler. He introduced himself as Miller. We walked into a windowless interview room featuring scuffed metal walls and a scarred aluminum table. Detective Miller sat across from me. He opened a standard yellow notepad and clicked his pen. "Tell me what happened, Ms. Davis," he said. I opened the black binder. I did not start with an emotional narrative. I started with the timeline. I placed the red final notice envelope on the table. I provided the printed screenshots of my ruined credit profile. I handed him the physical time card data and security swipe logs proving I was miles away during the loan execution. Miller took notes steadily. His demeanor remained professionally detached. People report family disputes involving stolen credit cards or unauthorized utility bills frequently. The initial scale of the crime did not shock him. Then I handed him the full origination packet from the dealership. I pointed to the forged signature. I pointed to the finance manager's authorization stamp. "Vincent Caldwell," I said. "He is my brother's former roommate. He acted as the inside facilitator to bypass physical identification protocols." Miller stopped writing. He looked at the signature block. An inside man at a licensed dealership elevated the situation from domestic dispute to organized commercial fraud. I placed the banking ledger on the table. "The fraud extends beyond the vehicle," I continued. "They authorized a $15,000 revolving credit line. They routed the verification check through a dormant college account my mother controlled." I highlighted the final row of the ledger. She wired $8,000 of the stolen funds directly to the Oak Creek Country Club to finance a private party. Miller read the ledger. He leaned back in his chair. He looked at me with a new level of intense scrutiny. The magnitude of the theft and the brazenness of the execution shifted the dynamic in the room. He realized I was not a disgruntled daughter seeking petty revenge. I was a financial professional handing him a fully investigated federal crime wrapped in a binder. I pulled the final piece of evidence from the back pocket. I placed the non-sufficient funds notification on the aluminum table. Last night, she attempted to stall my reporting deadline by initiating a fraudulent electronic transfer with a zero balance account, I said. Miller picked up his rubber authorization stamp. He rolled it across the black ink pad. He held the stamp hovering above the official intake form. "Are you certain you want to proceed, Ms. Davis?" he asked. His tone dropped an octave. It carried the weight of the legal machinery he was about to activate. "Once I stamp this document, the state takes over. We will notify the lending institution fraud department immediately. They will freeze every liquid asset tied to your parents and your brother pending the investigation. Your mother and your brother are looking at 5 to 10 years in a federal facility." I did not look at his eyes. I looked at the stack of papers sitting between us. On top of the pile was my denied mortgage application. Next to it was the forged contract for a luxury vehicle I had never driven. My hands rested flat on the aluminum table. My pulse was slow and steady. "Stamp it," I said. The hollow thud of the rubber stamp hitting the paper echoed in the small room. The red ink transferred the official seal and a unique case number onto the intake form. The loop was complete. The 48-hour window was closed. Miller handed me a carbon copy of the stamped report. "Keep this safe," he said. "Provide this case number to your credit bureaus and the bank manager." The Federal Trade Commission guidelines require them to immediately suspend collection efforts and remove the derogatory marks from your profile while the investigation is active. I slid the paper into the binder. The legal machine was now turning. The gears were grinding forward, and no amount of crying on my doorstep could stop them. I thanked Detective Miller. I walked out of the interview room and down the linoleum hallway. The lobby doors slid open. The morning sun had burned off the chill in the air. The warmth felt good against my skin. I got into my car and placed the binder on the passenger seat. My credit would begin healing by Monday. The duplex was back in play. I started the engine and pulled out of the visitor lot. The silence in the car felt different now. It did not feel like a holding cell. It felt like a fortress. I assumed the police would handle the rest of the conflict privately. I assumed detectives would quietly serve warrants and execute arrests. I underestimated my mother's need to control the narrative. The state police were moving in, but Susan had one final desperate play to maintain her illusion before the walls collapsed. She was going to drag me back into the arena one last time. 7 days after the heavy rubber stamp hit the intake form at the precinct, the financial guillotine dropped. I received a brief automated email from Detective Miller on Tuesday morning. The message confirmed that the lending institution had officially activated their internal fraud protocols. The bank locked every checking, savings, and investment account tied to Susan and Ryan Davis. Their debit cards transformed into useless plastic. Their digital wallets emptied. The state had effectively severed their financial oxygen supply while the investigators combed through the ledgers. That same evening, my cell phone rang. Susan illuminated the glass screen. I answered the call to hear her breathing heavily into the receiver. She sounded frantic but calculating. She was trying to maintain a veneer of control over a situation rapidly spiraling out of her grasp. "Mia, we need to stop this madness," she pleaded. Her tone carried a sharp edge of panic. "The bank shut off our access today. Your father tried to buy gas and his card declined. We cannot even buy groceries. We need to sit down and work this out with a neutral mediator before things escalate further. Come to your Aunt Barbara's house tonight at 8. She agreed to host a discussion so we can resolve this family dispute." I listened to her desperate pitch. A neutral mediator does not host a conflict resolution session at 8 in the evening inside a suburban living room. Barbara had already declared me deceased to the bloodline via text message just days prior. This was not a mediation. It was a calculated ambush. Susan wanted home field advantage. She orchestrated an audience to leverage public shame. She intended to pressure me into retracting the felony report by utilizing the sheer weight of familial guilt. I told her I would attend. I disconnected the call. I knew exactly what awaited me. I decided to walk into the trap anyway. A senior financial underwriter never avoids a hostile closing table. You face the opposition directly. You let them play their hand before you reveal the winning cards. I drove across town as the sun dipped below the horizon. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows over the manicured lawns of Barbara's neighborhood. I navigated my Honda down the quiet residential street. Vehicles lined both sides of the asphalt. I recognized Cousin David's silver sedan. I saw Uncle Robert's pickup truck. The driveway was packed with familiar cars. The entire extended network had gathered for the spectacle. I parked half a block away. I retrieved my structured leather briefcase from the passenger seat. The bag contained the physical copies of the bank ledgers, the forged signature packets, the wire transfer receipts, and the official police report. I walked up the concrete path to the front door. The porch light illuminated the brass knocker. I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The entryway smelled of cinnamon potpourri and baked sugar. The domestic scent clashed violently with the toxic intent vibrating within the walls. I stepped into the sprawling living room. 12 adults sat in a predetermined circle of plush sofas and folding chairs. The staging was undeniable. They formed a literal ring of judgment. Uncle Robert, Cousin David, Sarah, and several other relatives sat with their arms crossed. Their expressions radiated intense disapproval. The air felt thick and heavy. Susan occupied a floral armchair positioned directly in the center of the room. She clutched a crumpled tissue in her right hand. Ryan slouched on a leather ottoman near her left shoulder. My father stood near the brick fireplace with his gaze fixed firmly on the carpet. He refused to make eye contact with me. Aunt Barbara stood near the hallway archway. Her lips were pressed into a thin, tight line. Her face flushed with righteous indignation. She gestured toward a single empty wooden chair placed opposite Susan. "Sit down, Mia," Barbara commanded. Her voice echoed in the silent room. I did not sit in the designated chair. I remained standing just inside the threshold. I maintained my posture and held my briefcase at my side. Susan initiated the performance. She dabbed her dry eyes with the tissue. She pitched her voice to project vulnerability and heartbreak. "We are all here because this family is tearing itself apart over a simple paperwork misunderstanding," she announced to the room. She swept her gaze across her siblings and nephews. "I made an administrative error, trying to help Ryan secure transportation for his new career. Mia is destroying her own parents over a mistake. She called the authorities. She froze our bank accounts. We are being treated like common criminals over a private family matter." The relatives nodded in unison. They murmured their agreement. They viewed me as a corporate villain, prosecuting a fragile mother. They digested her narrative without requesting a single piece of supporting evidence. Barbara took the lead. She stepped forward and pointed a rigid index finger at my chest. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she scolded. "You are trying to bankrupt your parents over pure selfishness. Your mother cannot even purchase her prescription medication today because you locked her accounts. Drop this ridiculous lawsuit right now. You are acting like a spoiled brat who did not get her way." I absorbed the verbal assault. I noted her specific phrasing. She called it a lawsuit. The entire room believed this was a civil dispute. Susan had deliberately concealed the fact that this was an active criminal felony investigation. They thought I was suing for financial gain. My gaze shifted from Barbara's pointing finger to the leather ottoman. Ryan sat slightly behind our mother's weeping shoulder. He believed he was insulated from consequences. A distinct, arrogant smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth. He watched the family gang up on me. He looked deeply satisfied. He assumed the sheer volume of social pressure would crush my resolve. He thought a good daughter always folds under the threat of public excommunication. That smug expression solidified my focus. The temperature in my chest dropped to freezing. I stripped away the last remaining layers of sibling attachment. I channeled the exact clinical demeanor I utilized when terminating a multi-million-dollar commercial loan due to proven fraud. I did not shout to defend my character. I did not shed a single tear to counter my mother's theatrical performance. Emotional reactions feed the manipulator's narrative. I offered cold silence. I stepped away from the doorway and walked directly into the center of their staged circle. I stopped in front of the glass coffee table resting between Susan and the empty wooden chair. The relatives watched me with quiet hostility. They expected an apology. They expected a tearful surrender. I swung my heavy leather briefcase onto the glass surface. The impact produced a sharp thud that silenced the remaining whispers in the room. I rested my hands on the brass latches. The metal felt cool against my fingertips. I pressed the twin buttons. The clasps popped open with a loud, echoing click. The time for listening to fictional family narratives had concluded. The time for forensic disclosure had arrived. The brass latches on my briefcase clicked open. The sound cut through the heavy silence of Aunt Barbara's living room. 12 pairs of eyes tracked my hands as I lifted the leather flap. The family anticipated a retraction. They believed the unified front of suburban shame had successfully broken my resolve. I did not pull out a retraction. I pulled out a stack of high-resolution color copies. I am not involved in a civil lawsuit against my parents, I stated. My voice remained level and projected clearly to the back of the room. I did not sue anyone. I initiated a formal criminal investigation. A murmur rippled through the seated relatives. Susan shifted uncomfortably in her floral armchair. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped her crumpled tissue. I separated the first set of documents from the stack. I handed the top sheet to Uncle Robert, who sat closest to the coffee table. "Please pass these around," I requested. The sharp sound of thick printer paper sliding against skin echoed in the dead silent room. Robert looked at the page. His brow furrowed in confusion. He handed a copy to Cousin David. Within 30 seconds, every adult in the circle held the visual evidence. "You are holding the primary origination contract for a 2026 Audi Q7, valued at $72,000, I explained. On the left side of the page is a photograph of my actual signature, pulled directly from my state-issued driver's license. On the right side is the wet ink signature affixed to the auto loan." The relatives scrutinized the contrasting images. A child could identify the forgery. The loops were drastically mismatched. The pressure strokes lacked any fluidity. "My mother did not make an administrative error," I continued. "She physically forged my signature to execute a binding commercial contract. She utilized Ryan's former college roommate, the dealership finance manager, to bypass the mandated in-person identity verification protocols. That constitutes identity theft and commercial fraud." Susan sprang out of her chair. Her face flushed a deep crimson. "She lied," Susan shouted, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She agreed to co-sign the loan, and now she is trying to frame us because she regrets the liability. Do not look at those papers. She fabricated them." Barbara stepped forward. Her righteous indignation faltered slightly. She looked at the forged signature in her hand and then looked at her sister. "Susan," she asked hesitantly, "why does the signature look like that?" I did not let my mother regain control of the narrative. I reached into the briefcase and retrieved the second set of documents. I passed the staple packets directly to Barbara. I bypassed the intermediaries. I wanted the matriarch of the extended family to review the primary ledger. "Please review the disbursement tracking sheet on page 2, I instructed Barbara. That document details the secondary crime. The dealership did not just saddle me with an expensive vehicle. They activated a $15,000 revolving personal line of credit attached to my Social Security number to fund the down payment." Ryan shifted his weight on the leather ottoman. The smug smirk vanished from his face. He looked frantically at the front door, as if calculating the distance required to flee the premises. Barbara flipped to the second page. Her eyes scanned the numerical columns. $7,000 of that stolen credit was wired to the auto lot, I stated. My voice filled the quiet space, clinical and unforgiving. "Please read the payee name for the remaining $8,000 disbursement aloud, Aunt Barbara." The room waited. The tension stretched tight enough to snap. Barbara stared at the highlighted row on the bank ledger. Her lips parted slightly. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked up from the paper and stared directly at Susan. "Oak Creek Country Club," Barbara read. Her voice cracked on the final syllable. The relatives gasped collectively. The narrative of the devoted mother sacrificing her dignity to help a struggling son shattered instantly. The reality of the theft became undeniable. Susan stole $8,000 of my future to pay the non-refundable deposit for her 35th anniversary gala, I declared. She did not commit federal fraud to save Ryan. She committed federal fraud to buy herself a lavish party. She utilized stolen funds to purchase the expensive salmon dinners she planned to serve all of you next month. She financed her high society illusion by detonating my credit score and destroying my mortgage pre-approval. The energy in the living room shifted violently. The collective hostility previously directed at me instantly reoriented toward the center of the circle. The relatives did not hate the truth-teller. They hated the realization that they had been manipulated into defending a thief. They despised the fact that Susan weaponized their loyalty to cover up a vanity project funded by stolen money. Susan began to hyperventilate. The performance dissolved into genuine panic. "It was a loan," she screamed. "I was going to pay it back. The country club required cash up front. I just needed a bridge loan. We are family. Family borrows from each other." "You do not forge signatures to secure a bridge loan," Uncle Robert said. His deep voice resonated with profound disgust. He dropped the paper onto the coffee table. He refused to hold it any longer. "What is wrong with you, Susan?" I reached into my briefcase one final time. I pulled out the carbon copy of the official police intake form. The bold red ink of the precinct stamp stood out against the white paper. I dropped the document onto the center of the glass table. "This is the felony case number," I announced. "This incident involves a federally insured banking institution and electronic wire transfers crossing state lines. The investigation is officially out of my hands. I cannot retract the complaint. I cannot drop a lawsuit. The State Fraud Division controls the timeline now. The frozen bank accounts are merely the preliminary asset seizure. Subpoenas are next. Arrest warrants will follow." I snapped the brass latches of my briefcase shut. I picked up the leather handle. I looked around the room. The 12 adults who had gathered to publicly shame me were now staring at my mother with a mixture of horror and revulsion. The circle of judgment had successfully convicted a suspect. They simply convicted the wrong woman. I did not ask for apologies. I did not wait for Cousin David to retract his insulting text message. I accomplished my objective. I surgically excised the cancer from my reputation. I turned my back on the silent room. I walked through the archway and exited through the heavy front door. The cool night air felt clean and refreshing against my face. I walked down the concrete path toward my Honda. I expected to feel a sense of triumphant victory. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow calm. The truth was out. The family dynamic was permanently destroyed. I started the engine and drove away from the curb. I assumed the public humiliation would force Ryan and Susan to surrender to the legal process. I assumed they would secure defense attorneys and prepare for the inevitable indictments. I underestimated my brother's capacity for self-destruction. Ryan was not going to wait for the detectives to knock on his door. He was going to attempt a desperate, high-stakes exit strategy that would escalate the crisis from white-collar fraud to international smuggling. The fallout from the intervention in the suburbs manifested as profound silence. For 48 hours, my cell phone did not receive a single text message or missed call. The family group chat remained entirely dormant. The organized network of relatives who previously bombarded me with insults retreated into the shadows. The physical evidence presented in Aunt Barbara's living room shattered their righteous indignation. They finally understood the reality of the situation. My parents were not victims of a corporate misunderstanding. They were architects of a calculated financial crime. The social isolation did not bother me anymore. I focused my energy on repairing the structural damage they inflicted upon my life. I contacted the credit bureaus and provided the official police report case number. The federal guidelines initiated the dispute process. My credit score would remain suppressed for another week while the agencies verified the documentation, but the path to recovery was secure. I assumed Ryan and Susan were utilizing this quiet period to consult defense attorneys. I expected them to prepare for the inevitable arrival of law enforcement. I fundamentally misunderstood my brother's psychology. Ryan never accepted accountability for his failures. Whenever he faced a corner, he searched for an escape hatch. Thursday morning arrived with a gray, overcast sky. I sat at my home office desk reviewing an appraisal report for a commercial client. A hot cup of green tea rested near my keyboard. At exactly 9:14, a sharp digital chime emitted from my personal laptop. A notification banner slid across the upper right corner of the screen. It was a custom Google alert. 3 weeks earlier, during my initial investigation into the forged auto loan, I extracted the 17-character vehicle identification number from the dealership origination packet. An underwriter understands that a vehicle is a physical asset with a digital footprint. I inputted that specific alphanumeric sequence into several tracking algorithms. I commanded the search engine to notify me instantly if those 17 characters appeared anywhere on the public internet. I clicked the notification banner. The browser opened a new tab. The routing sequence hesitated for several seconds. The uniform resource locator in the address bar did not end in a standard commercial domain. The connection bounced through a proxy server before landing on a sparse, text-heavy message board. The website operated on the fringes of the dark web. It functioned as an underground marketplace for high-end automotive transactions. No dealer logos decorated the margins. No financing calculators sat at the bottom of the page. The user interface consisted of dark gray backgrounds and anonymous seller profiles. I scrolled down the active listing. A series of high-resolution photographs loaded onto my screen. The metallic gray 2026 Audi Q7 filled the frame. I recognized the custom dealer plate frame. I recognized the distinct reflection of the industrial brick building in the background. It was my brother's apartment complex. Ryan had taken the photos in his parking garage. I reviewed the text block beneath the images. The asking price was listed at $55,000. The seller explicitly demanded untraceable wire transfers or hard currency. The location details noted the vehicle was currently staged less than 5 miles from the port of Wilmington. The geographic detail triggered an immediate memory. The radio broadcast I heard driving home weeks ago echoed in my mind. Customs agents were battling a surge of stolen luxury vehicles being loaded into shipping containers. Criminal syndicates fenced these high-value assets to international exporters. Once a car crossed the ocean, it entered foreign markets where United States lien databases held zero jurisdiction. The vehicle vanishes forever. Ryan was not attempting to sell the car to a local resident. He intended to broker a deal with an overseas exporter. The bank had frozen his domestic accounts. He possessed zero liquid cash. He formulated a desperate exit strategy. He planned to trade the $72,000 vehicle for $55,000 in untraceable currency. He would pocket the cash and flee the jurisdiction, leaving the empty husk of the original loan securely fastened to my Social Security number. A glaring logistical problem existed with his plan. An international auto exporter requires specific paperwork to clear customs at the port. They demand a clean title to prove the asset is free of domestic encumbrances. The lending institution held the actual title in their secure vault because the vehicle carried a massive lien. I clicked the final image in the gallery to see how Ryan planned to bypass the customs requirement. The photograph expanded. Ryan uploaded a scanned image of a state-issued vehicle title. I leaned closer to the monitor. The document displayed my full legal name as the registered owner. I scanned the middle section of the page. The designated box reserved for the primary lien holder was entirely blank. I am a financial professional who reviews state collateral documents daily. I know the exact visual markers of a legitimate government certificate. I identified the discrepancies immediately. The microprinted border lacked the correct depth. The typography on the state seal utilized an incorrect font rendering. Ryan manipulated a digital template. He erased the lending bank's claim to the asset. He forged a paid-in-full status to create a counterfeit clean title. He intended to use this fabricated government document to dupe the exporter and facilitate the smuggling operation. This discovery represented a terrifying escalation in the threat level. Identity theft to secure a loan is a white-collar paper crime. The perpetrator defrauds a corporation using unauthorized credentials. Forging a state vehicle title to fence a financed asset to an international smuggling ring crosses a profound legal threshold. Ryan upgraded his offenses from identity theft to grand theft auto and felony title fraud. My pulse elevated. The slow, methodical pace of a corporate fraud investigation just transformed into a ticking clock. If that Audi rolled into a shipping container at the Wilmington port, the physical evidence of the crime would disappear into the Atlantic Ocean. I needed to act before the transaction finalized. I did not panic. I engaged my forensic protocol. I utilized screen capture software to record every pixel of the dark web listing. I archived the photographs, the proxy routing information, the seller profile, and the fabricated title document. I compiled the raw data into a secure, encrypted folder on my desktop. I opened my email client and drafted a direct message to Detective Miller at the Financial Crimes Division. I attached the encrypted folder. I outlined the exact nature of the fencing operation. I highlighted the geographic proximity to the port and explained the mechanics of the title forgery. I flagged the email with high importance and requested immediate interception. I pressed send. The digital packet launched into the ether. I sat back in my ergonomic chair and took a sip of my green tea. The liquid had gone cold. The situation had accelerated beyond a simple dispute over a ruined credit score. My brother was actively attempting to execute a major felony flight risk. The state authorities would not send a polite letter requesting an interview anymore. They would dispatch tactical units to secure the vehicle and apprehend the suspect. The net was closing rapidly around the Davis family. The authorities prepared to drop the hammer. Law enforcement officials possess very little patience for suspects who attempt to liquidate evidence while under active investigation. I assumed the impending police action would force my parents into quiet submission. I underestimated the sheer destructive power of a narcissist losing control. Susan was about to realize that her carefully constructed illusion was collapsing. The realization would provoke a chaotic and dangerous reaction. The legal strike was imminent, and the matriarch was preparing to unleash a frantic counterattack before the authorities arrived at her doorstep. The intelligence regarding the dark web fencing operation triggered an immediate escalation within the state law enforcement apparatus. Bureaucratic delays evaporated. By late Friday morning, the Financial Crimes Division initiated a synchronized tactical response. The authorities did not commence their sweep by chasing the elusive brother. They struck the epicenter of the conspiracy first. Plainclothes detectives arrived unannounced at the Newark residence belonging to my parents. The officers brandished judicial subpoenas signed by a county judge, granting them the power to execute a comprehensive search and seizure protocol. They confiscated every digital device inside the home. Laptops, desktop hard drives, tablets, and cellular phones were bagged and tagged. The investigators needed the hardware to trace the origin of the joint checking account breach and the digital footprint left by the fabricated vehicle title. I remained unaware of the morning raid until my personal smartphone vibrated across the wooden surface of my home office desk. The caller identification screen illuminated with my mother's name. I declined the incoming connection. Engaging in a live conversation with a volatile suspect offers zero tactical advantage. I allowed the system to route her to the digital answering service. 3 minutes later, an audio file materialized in my inbox. I clicked the playback icon. The sound that emanated from the speakers lacked any trace of the polished suburban matriarch. Susan sounded feral. Her breathing hitched, ragged and sharp, echoing the pure panic of a cornered animal realizing the trap had snapped shut. "Mia, you treacherous little snake," she shrieked into the receiver. The background audio captured the faint sound of heavy boots walking across hardwood floors. "The police are standing in my foyer right now. They took your father's computer. They placed my phone in a plastic bag." I had to borrow a neighbor's device just to call you. You listen to me very carefully. You will contact that detective immediately and state you made a terrible mistake. You will drop these fabricated charges today. If you refuse, I swear I will ruin your life. I will hire defense attorneys to sue you for elder abuse. I will contact the bank board and claim you steal confidential client data. You fix this mess, or you will wish you were never born. The recording clicked off. The quiet atmosphere of my office returned. Susan believed her aggressive intimidation tactics would force a surrender. Instead, she handed the prosecution a pristine, undeniable gift. Threatening a victim with retaliation to compel the retraction of a formal police statement constitutes a severe legal violation. The act qualifies as felony witness obstruction. She documented her own criminal intent and transmitted the evidence directly to my inbox. I downloaded the audio file, attached the recording to a fresh email, and forwarded the threat directly to the lead investigator. Before the adrenaline from the voicemail could dissipate, a second call broke the silence. Thomas Harrison, the branch manager from the local lending institution, occupied the other end of the line. His vocal cadence projected professional gravity mixed with palpable relief. Ms. Davis, Harrison stated, I am contacting you to provide an official update regarding your financial profile. Our internal compliance team received the verified police reports and the active warrant notifications issued by the State Fraud Division. The corporation officially classified the auto loan and the revolving personal credit line as confirmed identity theft. I held my breath, waiting for the conclusion. We expunged the fraudulent accounts from your Social Security number, he continued. The liabilities no longer exist within our internal ledgers. We transmitted the updated data files to the major credit bureaus this morning. Your profile is eradicated of all derogatory marks. I thanked Harrison with profound gratitude and terminated the connection. I opened my internet browser and navigated to the monitoring portal. The loading icons spun for several seconds. When the dashboard finally rendered, the red warning dial had vanished. A bright green arch replaced the symbol of impending doom. The numerical display rested at 790. The sheer magnitude of the victory washed over me. I placed my palms flat against the desk to steady my trembling hands. The duplex was secure. The grueling years of intense financial discipline were salvaged. The spreadsheet robot played the long game and won. The momentary triumph faded when my device rang a third time. Detective Miller possessed a gruff, urgent cadence. We secured the arrest warrants for your brother, Miller announced without preamble. A judge signed the orders for grand theft auto, wire fraud, and title forgery. We also obtained an emergency repossession writ for the Audi Q7 to secure the asset as primary physical evidence. Did your team intercept the vehicle at the port? I asked. We missed him, Miller replied. Frustration bled through his standard professionalism. We raided his apartment complex an hour ago. The unit was abandoned. The parking garage contained nothing. Ryan is in the wind. He knows the net is closing, and he is concealing the asset. If he manages to stash that car inside a shipping container before we locate him, our jurisdictional authority evaporates into international waters. Ryan possessed a narrow window to execute the dark web transaction with the overseas exporter. He needed to lay low until the port contacts provided the logistical green light to move the cargo. I ended the call and walked into my kitchen to pour a glass of water. My gaze drifted across the granite countertop. Next to the ceramic fruit bowl sat a piece of mail I had neglected to discard. It was a heavy, cream-colored envelope featuring elegant calligraphy. The edges were stamped in brilliant metallic foil. The invitation to Susan and David's 35th anniversary gala. My parents originally scheduled the lavish event for this coming Saturday evening. Despite the frozen accounts, the ruined reputation, and the morning police raid, Susan never formally canceled the gathering. Canceling the party required acknowledging a public failure. Her pathological need to maintain her high society facade dictated that the performance must proceed. The $8,000 stolen deposit secured the grand ballroom, the upscale catering, and the premium open bar. She intended to host the extended family and pretend her reality remained intact. Ryan thrived on that exact same brand of vanity. He worshipped status above survival. If his mother hosted an extravagant country club gala, the golden child would not miss the opportunity to wear a tailored suit and project an image of immense wealth to his relatives, even with felony warrants hanging over his head. Furthermore, he possessed an $80,000 luxury vehicle he believed was untraceable due to the counterfeit title. He would want to display the trophy one last time before selling it to the smugglers. The variables aligned with mathematical precision. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Detective Miller's direct line. He answered immediately. "I know where my brother will be tomorrow night," I said, "and I know exactly where he will park the stolen vehicle." I read the address of the Oak Creek Country Club to the investigator. I provided the specific start time for the cocktail hour. I advised Miller to position his tactical units near the front valet circle. Narcissists do not hide their stolen trophies in the shadowy backlots. They park them right by the front door to maximize the audience. The setup locked into place. Susan utilized my stolen credit to fund the stage for her grand performance. It felt uniquely poetic to utilize that very same stage to orchestrate their ultimate downfall. The Oak Creek Country Club projected an atmosphere of exclusivity designed to intimidate outsiders. A long, winding driveway bordered by ancient willow trees led up to a sprawling clubhouse constructed from pale stone and slate. Saturday night arrived with clear skies and a slight chill in the autumn air. I parked my reliable Honda in the overflow gravel lot near the maintenance sheds, far away from the illuminated grand entrance. I did not want my arrival to trigger any premature alarms. I wore a simple black dress, blending seamlessly with the shadows. I walked the perimeter of the property, bypassing the main lobby entirely. I utilized a secondary entrance meant for event staff and slipped into the grand ballroom through a set of heavy wooden double doors near the catering station. The ballroom dazzled with opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting a warm golden glow over circular tables draped in heavy white linen. Enormous floral arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas served as centerpieces. A string quartet played classical music in the corner, providing an elegant soundtrack to the evening. The $8,000 stolen from my personal credit line bought a truly spectacular illusion. I positioned myself near the rear exit, standing quietly beside a tall velvet curtain. The vantage point offered a comprehensive view of the entire room and a direct line of sight through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows looking out onto the front valet circle. My intuition regarding my brother proved flawlessly accurate. Parked directly beneath the glowing portico, occupying the premier display spot usually reserved for the club president, sat the metallic gray 2026 Audi Q7. Ryan had instructed the valet staff to leave the vehicle front and center. He wanted every arriving guest to witness his manufactured success before they even stepped inside the venue. The arrogance required to parade a stolen, federally flagged asset at a public gathering defied logical comprehension. He believed his fabricated title granted him invincibility. Inside the ballroom, the extended family mingled and drank premium cocktails. I spotted Aunt Barbara holding a crystal flute, chatting amiably with Uncle Robert. Cousin David laughed loudly near the open bar. The relatives who had condemned me during the suburban intervention now enjoyed the fruits of the financial crime they claimed to abhor. They chose to ignore the messy reality of felony fraud in exchange for a night of free luxury and high society pretend. The string quartet transitioned into a bright, celebratory melody. A distinct tapping sound cut through the music. Susan stood at the front of the room upon a small, elevated stage. She tapped a silver spoon against her champagne glass to command attention. She wore a floor-length emerald gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Her hair was professionally styled, and expensive diamond earrings framed her face. She looked radiant, entirely unbothered by the fact that state detectives had raided her home and confiscated her digital life just 24 hours prior. Her capacity for compartmentalization bordered on the pathological. David stood passively by her side, wearing a tailored tuxedo, projecting the image of a devoted patriarch. Ryan occupied the table closest to the stage. He wore a sharp navy suit, sipping a scotch on the rocks, looking incredibly pleased with himself. "Thank you all for gathering here tonight to celebrate 35 years of marriage," Susan began. Her voice, amplified by a microphone, filled the massive room. The guests quieted down, turning their attention toward the matriarch. I watched the performance unfold with a profound sense of dramatic irony. The audience standing in that ballroom believed they were witnessing a testament to enduring love and familial success. I knew the foundation holding up the stage was constructed from forgery, theft, and deceit. And more importantly, I knew the foundation was currently scheduled for immediate demolition. "A marriage is built on a foundation of absolute trust," Susan continued, placing a manicured hand over her heart. "It requires weathering storms and remaining loyal to the people who matter most. We have faced challenges recently. We have endured ungrateful individuals attempting to tear us down. But tonight proves that true devotion always triumphs over petty jealousy." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Aunt Barbara nodded solemnly. They were actively reinforcing the narrative that I was a vindictive outcast who failed to destroy their resilient bond. Through the massive glass windows behind the stage, I noticed a subtle shift in the darkness at the end of the long driveway. The distant glow of headlights appeared, multiplying rapidly. "We raised our children to understand the value of hard work," Susan proclaimed, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "We taught them the importance of earning your keep and building a legacy that honors the family name. Ryan, my wonderful son, you are the living embodiment of that legacy. You weathered a difficult season and emerged stronger, securing a bright future through your own determination." Ryan raised his scotch glass toward his mother, acknowledging the praise with a humble nod. Outside the country club, the approaching headlights extinguished abruptly. They were replaced by a rapid, silent burst of illumination. Red and blue strobes painted the ancient willow trees lining the driveway. The visual was unmistakable. The tactical units did not utilize sirens. They opted for a stealth approach to prevent the target from executing a chaotic flight response. The flashing colors multiplied as multiple cruisers accelerated toward the main entrance. Susan remained completely oblivious to the approaching storm. She possessed no line of sight to the windows. Her attention remained fixed on her captive audience. "So tonight, I ask you all to raise a glass," Susan instructed, lifting her champagne flute high into the air. "Let us toast to honesty. Let us toast to loyalty. And let us toast to the unbreakable strength of this family." The guests raised their glasses in unison. The crystal chimed as they echoed the sentiment. "To honesty," they murmured. I watched through the glass as 2 unmarked sedans and 3 marked police cruisers swerved aggressively into the valet circle, boxing the pristine Audi Q7 in from multiple angles. A massive flatbed tow truck rumbled into view behind the police vehicles, its diesel engine vibrating the pavement. The trap snapped shut with surgical precision. Uniformed officers poured out of the cruisers, securing the perimeter of the portico. 2 plainclothes detectives, including Miller, bypassed the valet podium and marched purposefully toward the heavy glass doors of the main lobby. The toast concluded. The guests began to take sips of their champagne. The string quartet prepared to resume their performance. The heavy wooden doors leading from the lobby into the grand ballroom swung open with a violent, echoing crash. The sound reverberated off the vaulted ceilings, instantly silencing the room. The music died abruptly. The festive atmosphere evaporated in a single second. Detective Miller stepped through the threshold, followed by 3 uniformed officers. The metallic clinking of handcuffs attached to their duty belts provided the only soundtrack. The ultimate collision of Susan's carefully constructed illusion and the harsh reality of the American justice system was imminent. The matriarch raised her glass to honesty, and the authorities arrived to collect the tab. The heavy wooden doors rebounding against the wall sounded like a gunshot in the silent ballroom. The crystal glasses paused midway to the guests' lips. 100 attendees turned their heads simultaneously toward the lobby entrance. Detective Miller did not pause to scan the crowd or wait for a host to approach. He moved with the undeniable momentum of state authority. He walked directly across the polished parquet dance floor, his gray suit a stark contrast against the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. 3 uniformed officers fanned out slightly behind him, establishing a tactical perimeter. The string quartet lowered their instruments. The silence in the room became absolute, broken only by the squeak of tactical boots against the polished wood. "Ryan Davis," Miller announced. His voice did not require a microphone to reach the back of the room. It cut through the opulence like a steel blade. "Step away from the table and keep your hands visible." Ryan remained frozen in his chair for 3 agonizing seconds. The scotch glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor, amber liquid soaking into the white linen tablecloth. The golden child finally comprehended that the consequences of his actions had arrived to collect. The fabricated title and the dark web listing provided 0 protection against a felony warrant execution. Instinct overrode logic. Ryan pushed his chair back violently, the wooden legs shrieking against the floor. He lunged toward the side exit leading to the patio terraces. He managed exactly 4 steps. 2 uniformed officers intercepted his path with practiced efficiency. They grabbed his arms, spun him around, and pressed him face first against the nearest circular table. The floral centerpiece toppled over, sending white roses scattering across the floor. The sharp, unmistakable, ratcheting sound of steel handcuffs locking around wrists echoed through the ballroom. "Ryan Davis, you are under arrest for grand theft auto, wire fraud, and felony title forgery," the arresting officer stated, reciting the charges loudly as he secured the restraints. The guests erupted into chaotic murmurs. Aunt Barbara pressed a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Cousin David stepped back, instinctively distancing himself from the arrest. The relatives who had blindly supported the matriarch's narrative now witnessed the undeniable physical reality of the situation. A federal crime was not a private misunderstanding. It resulted in public apprehension and steel cuffs. Susan remained on the elevated stage, paralyzed by the sudden destruction of her performance. The shock held her captive for a brief moment before the narcissistic need to control the environment reactivated. She dropped her champagne flute. The glass shattered, but the sound was lost in the rising commotion of the crowd. "What are you doing?" Susan shrieked. Her voice cracked, stripping away the refined modulation she utilized during her speech. She scrambled down the short staircase, the fabric of her emerald gown catching on her heels. She rushed across the dance floor toward the arresting officers. "Let him go immediately. You are making a terrible mistake. He is a good boy. This is a private event. You have no jurisdiction here." Miller stepped into her path, utilizing his body to physically block her from reaching the officers securing her son. "Ma'am, step back," he ordered firmly. She ignored the command. She raised her hands and lunged forward, attempting to push the detective aside. "You are ruining my anniversary," she screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. "Stop this right now. I demand you unhand my son." Miller did not raise his voice. He reached into the inner breast pocket of his suit jacket and produced a thick, folded document. He caught Susan by the wrist as she attempted to strike his shoulder. The sudden physical contact halted her frantic momentum. Susan Davis, Miller stated loudly, ensuring the entire audience of extended relatives heard every syllable. I am serving you with a formal criminal summons. You are required to appear before the Superior Court regarding your active indictment for felony identity theft and commercial bank fraud. He pressed the heavy legal document into her hand. Susan stared at the paper. The gold bracelets stacked on her wrist clinked together, producing a chaotic metallic jangling sound that betrayed the violent trembling of her hands. The physical manifestation of her crimes rested in her palm. She could not gaslight a Superior Court summons. She could not spin a narrative to manipulate a judge. The legal document stripped away her armor of denial and exposed the raw truth to the entire room. The guests remained silent, watching the matriarch crumble. Aunt Barbara looked away, unable to meet her sister's gaze. The social facade that Susan spent decades cultivating, the illusion of wealth and moral superiority she desperately protected, vaporized in an instant. She was publicly and permanently unmasked as a criminal at the exact event she funded with stolen money. The poetic justice of the moment possessed a perfect, devastating symmetry. A collective gasp from the guests standing near the windows drew my attention away from the stage. I looked through the massive panes of glass looking out over the valet circle. The flashing red and blue strobes painted the exterior of the club in chaotic light. The flatbed tow truck reversed slowly, positioning its ramp directly in front of the metallic gray Audi Q7. A burly operator hopped out of the cab, dragging a heavy steel chain across the pavement. He secured the thick metal hooks to the undercarriage of the luxury vehicle. The winch engaged with a loud mechanical whine that penetrated the glass windows. The guests watched in horrified fascination as the physical symbol of Ryan's unearned entitlement was slowly dragged onto the tilted flatbed. The vehicle that destroyed my credit profile, the $80,000 liability that triggered this entire catastrophic chain of events, was officially repossessed by the state as primary evidence. The gleaming predator was reduced to a piece of confiscated property. I remained standing near the velvet curtain by the catering doors. I watched the officers escort a handcuffed, sobbing Ryan across the ballroom. He kept his head down, unable to look at the relatives who had praised his fabricated success just minutes earlier. They guided him out the front doors and into the back of a waiting police cruiser. Susan collapsed onto an empty chair, clutching the court summons to her chest, wailing uncontrollably. David stood beside her, his shoulders slumped in defeat, offering zero comfort. The patriarchal enabler finally realized the consequences of his complicity. I stepped out from the shadows of the curtain. I did not intend to make a dramatic exit or deliver a final verbal blow. The visual evidence spoke louder than any speech I could formulate. As I walked toward the side exit, my movement caught Susan's eye. She looked up from the crumpled paper in her hands. Our gazes met across the chaotic, ruined ballroom. Her expression shifted rapidly from despair to a flash of pure, venomous recognition. She understood the orchestration of the evening. She realized I had provided the address, timed the interception, and utilized her own vanity to ensure maximum public exposure. The spreadsheet robot had executed a flawless tactical maneuver. I stopped walking. I held her gaze for 3 seconds. I did not smile. I did not display an ounce of anger or pity. I offered a profound clinical indifference. I gave her a single, almost imperceptible nod, acknowledging the conclusion of our conflict. I turned away and pushed the heavy wooden doors open, stepping out into the cool night air. The flashing lights of the police cruisers receded into the distance as the caravan departed down the long driveway. The heavy steel chains securing the Audi rattled against the flatbed, providing the final auditory punctuation to the evening. The family dynamic was dead. The fraudulent debt was expunged. The perpetrators were apprehended. I walked through the overflow lot toward my reliable Honda, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The legal process would undoubtedly require my testimony in the future, but the immediate warfare was concluded. The burden of maintaining their lies belonged entirely to the state now, leaving me free to finally reclaim the future they attempted to steal. 6 months drifted by. The changing of the seasons mirrored the systematic dismantling of the Davis family structure. The American justice system operates with an inexorable grinding motion. Once the gears catch the fabric of a crime, they do not stop turning until the ledger balances. Ryan faced the unyielding reality of federal and state prosecution. His desperate attempt to fence a stolen asset to an international smuggling ring utilizing a fabricated government document elevated his case far beyond a simple plea arrangement. The prosecuting attorney showed zero leniency for title fraud. During the sentencing hearing, my brother traded his designer Navy suit for a standard-issue uniform. He stood before a superior court judge in a sterile judicial chamber and received an 18-month sentence in a medium-security correctional facility upstate. Furthermore, the court mandated a harsh restitution order that will garnish his wages long after his eventual release date. The golden child finally encountered a tab he could not manipulate someone else into paying. The illusion of his success evaporated behind barbed wire and concrete walls. Susan and David evaded a prison block, but their survival required a catastrophic financial sacrifice. They secured a plea agreement for their respective roles in the identity theft and bank fraud. The judge sentenced them to 5 years of strict, supervised probation and mandated hundreds of hours of community service. However, remaining out of a cell carried an exorbitant price tag. Retaining expert criminal defense attorneys capable of navigating interstate wire fraud charges depleted their life savings within 90 days. When the liquid cash evaporated, they liquidated their physical assets. The aging colonial home in suburban Newark went on the market. The house featuring the manicured lawn, the aggregate concrete driveway, and the grand foyer where they once ate roasted chicken while gaslighting their daughter became a distressed sale. The bank demanded satisfaction for the mounting legal debts. Neighbors watched from their porches as moving trucks hauled away the remnants of their life. My parents downsized to a cramped rental apartment on the industrial outskirts of the city. The country club formally revoked their membership due to the public scandal. The high society illusion fractured into 1 million unrecoverable pieces, leaving them with nothing but the reality of their own actions. The collateral damage extended far beyond my immediate parents. Aunt Barbara, the fierce matriarch of the extended network, who spearheaded the text message smear campaign against me, learned a brutal lesson regarding toxic loyalty. During the chaotic hours following the anniversary gala arrests, Susan required an immediate financial lifeline. The state had frozen my parents' accounts pending the investigation. Susan placed a desperate phone call to her older sister from a precinct holding cell. Barbara, clinging to the same blind family devotion she tried to weaponize against me, agreed to help. She signed her name as the primary guarantor on the commercial bail bonds for both Susan and Ryan. She leveraged the accumulated equity in her own home to secure their temporary freedom before the trials. Now, with my parents functionally bankrupt and Ryan sitting in a cell, Barbara remains financially tethered to a sinking ship. She spends her days terrified that a missed premium payment or a minor probation violation will cost her her retirement savings. The enabler transformed into a warden. She calls my parents daily, demanding updates on their employment status, suffocating under the crushing weight of the relatives she chose to defend. The woman who boldly declared I was dead to the family now wishes she had ignored her phone that night. While their world collapsed into ruin, my foundation solidified into stone. My credit profile emerged from the federal dispute process pristine and unblemished. The investigative algorithm scrubbed the final traces of the fraudulent auto loan and the phantom credit line from my history. I returned to my designated lane and resumed my original trajectory. I sat in a high-rise office building in downtown Wilmington. The air conditioning hummed a steady rhythm overhead. A massive mahogany conference table stretched out before me, polished to a high mirror shine. Marcus, the senior loan officer who initially discovered the fraudulent trade line months ago, sat across from me. A licensed title agent occupied the chair to my right. A thick stack of real estate mortgage documents rested on the wood. I picked up a heavy rollerball pen with black ink. I did not utilize a backdoor entry. I did not require an inside man to bypass security protocols. I read every single line of the closing disclosures. The numbers printed on the page reflected my own authentic labor. The debt-to-income ratio aligned perfectly with strict federal lending guidelines. The prime interest rate locked in, validated by my restored credit score. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name. I crafted the loops with deliberate, careful precision. I applied even pressure across the signature line. The wet ink bonded with the fiber of the page, creating a legally binding contract that belonged entirely to me. I signed my name 42 times across various disclosures and liability waivers. Each signature erased a fraction of the betrayal I endured 6 months prior. The title agent collected the final document from the stack. She stamped her official notary seal onto the paper, verifying my identity with a quick, professional glance at my state-issued driver license. She smiled warmly and closed the thick manila folder. "Congratulations, Ms. Davis," she said. "The property is officially yours." She reached into her blazer pocket and extended her hand across the table. I opened my palm. She dropped a heavy set of keys into my waiting hand. The cold brass hit my skin. The jagged teeth of the metal pressed into my palm, grounding me in the physical reality of the moment. The sensory anchor solidified my victory. These keys did not start a depreciating luxury vehicle destined for an international shipping container. They unlocked the front door of a historic brick duplex located just south of the city center. They represented passive income, untouchable equity, and an impenetrable fortress built upon forensic truth. I possessed a sanctuary where no one else held a copy of the key. I walked out of the office building and stepped onto the busy Wilmington sidewalk. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders, cutting through the crisp breeze coming off the river. I felt an overwhelming sense of lightness in my chest. I severed the toxic branches of my family tree, and the roots of my own life grew infinitely stronger in response. Welcome to the end of the line. If you are listening to this and you find yourself constantly sacrificing your own stability to fund the poor decisions of the people sharing your DNA, I need you to understand a harsh reality. The people who demand your silent sacrifice do not respect you. They merely respect what they can extract from you. They will utilize guilt, shame, and public pressure to keep you compliant. Blood makes you related, but a paper trail makes you free. Never set yourself on fire to keep someone else's luxury car warm. The manipulators in your life rely on your silence and your misguided guilt to sustain their illusions. They weaponize your loyalty against your own future. You have the power to break the cycle. Trust the math. Gather the evidence. Secure your boundaries. Lock your credit. And let the authorities handle the rest. The truth does not require a polite delivery. The truth only requires documentation. Thank you for joining me on Elena Vengeance. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below and share your own experiences with setting boundaries against toxic relatives. Your story might be the exact blueprint someone else needs to finally break free. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I will see you in the next story. The framed family photograph sits on mantelpieces and hangs in hallways across the country. We all recognize the composition. Parents and children pose in coordinated outfits, smiling brightly under the dappled light of a suburban afternoon. In American culture, that image represents the ultimate achievement. It broadcasts stability, warmth, and the successful realization of the domestic dream. We are conditioned to trust the photograph. But if the harrowing saga of Mia Davis teaches us anything, it is that a photograph only captures a fraction of a second. It captures the performance. It rarely captures the truth. When we strip away the shock of the forged signatures, the dark web fencing operation, and the flashing police lights at the country club, a deeper tragedy emerges from the wreckage. This was not merely a sequence of financial crimes. It was a profound, systemic failure of parental duty. It serves as a chilling case study on what happens when the traditional family structure rots from the inside, hollowed out by a lack of emotional awareness, honesty, and fundamental fairness. Consider the trajectory of the golden child. A man does not wake up one morning and decide to smuggle a luxury vehicle across international waters using a fabricated government document. That level of entitlement requires years of careful cultivation. Ryan was molded by parents who fundamentally misunderstood the concept of long-term guidance. In their desperate attempt to display a successful son to the world, they paved his road with soft cushions and erased every obstacle in his path. True family responsibility does not mean shielding a child from the consequences of their actions. When parents rescue a son from his own reckless debts by handing him the keys to an expensive machine he did not earn, they do not offer love. They offer poison. They rob him of the opportunity to develop resilience. They teach him that accountability is a burden meant for other people. In modern society, where the pressure to project success often overshadows the hard work required to achieve it, parents sometimes confuse indulging a child with supporting them. Ryan learned that the appearance of wealth mattered more than the integrity required to build it. He became a hollow man, wearing tailored suits funded by deceit, because his parents never taught him the value of an honest dollar. Then we must look at the capable child. Mia represents a specific kind of American tragedy, the parentified daughter. She learned discipline, caution, and delayed gratification because she had no safety net. She built a pristine credit score and saved for a duplex while her brother coasted. In a healthy family dynamic, parents celebrate that fierce independence. They recognize the sacrifices their daughter makes and honor her boundaries. Susan and David did not celebrate Mia. They weaponized her competence. They looked at their own flesh and blood and saw a utility. They viewed her impeccable financial standing as an unmined resource they could extract to balance their own parental failures. The betrayal cuts so deeply because it perverts the very nature of the parent and child relationship. A parent is supposed to act as a shield against the harsh realities of the world. Instead, Susan transformed into the predator, utilizing an 11-year-old dormant college account to bypass security protocols and drain her daughter's future. She sacrificed the child who did everything right to subsidize the child who did everything wrong. This dynamic exposes a severe lack of emotional awareness. Fairness in parenting does not necessarily mean identical treatment, but it requires a baseline of equitable respect. You cannot set one child on fire to keep the other warm. When Susan stood in her sister's living room, weeping crocodile tears and framing Mia as a jealous corporate villain, she demonstrated the darkest side of maternal manipulation. She loved the narrative of her family more than she loved the actual human beings living inside it. She desired the country club gala, the expensive salmon dinners, and the applause of her relatives more than she desired a genuine connection with her daughter. Raising children within a traditional structure demands an unwavering commitment to honesty. The foundation of any lasting lineage is trust. When parents lie to maintain a comfortable facade, they teach their children that deception is a valid survival strategy. The rot creeps into the floorboards. The family stops functioning as a sanctuary and becomes a theater of performance art. Everyone plays a role, reading lines from a script written by whoever holds the most power, smiling for the camera while the walls collapse behind them. The story of the Davis family provides a stark warning for anyone navigating the complex waters of kinship and obligation. It challenges the inherent cultural belief that blood dictates unwavering loyalty. We are taught to forgive our parents because they gave us life. We are pressured to absorb the flaws of our siblings because we share the same history. But loyalty, extracted through guilt, is merely hostage-taking. Genuine family responsibility is a reciprocal agreement. It requires accountability from the elders and integrity from the youth. We explore these hidden dynamics, the unspoken contracts of family life, and the courage required to break toxic cycles every single day here on Elena Vengeance. If you are navigating your own complex family landscape, if you are learning how to draw lines in the sand, join our community. Hit the subscribe button, share your experiences in the comments, and walk with us as we untangle the complicated webs of human behavior. You do not have to carry the weight of someone else's illusion alone. In the end, Mia walked away with the heavy brass keys to her own duplex. She secured her sanctuary because she chose objective reality over a comforting lie. She stopped accepting the toxic currency her parents offered. As the dust settles on the country club arrests and the shattered reputations, a quiet question lingers in the air. Look at the framed photographs sitting on your own mantelpiece. Look at the coordinated outfits and the bright, perfect smiles. What happens when the camera flashes and the photographer walks away? Do the people in the frames support each other when the room goes dark, or do they retreat to their separate corners, guarding their own secrets? The true legacy of a family is not measured by the vehicles parked in the driveway or the venues rented for anniversaries. It is measured by what remains when all the money is gone, the masks are removed, and the only thing left to offer each other is the truth.